Hey everybody, it is late at night and I am Norman. There is one component that is on every watch. Well, not digital watches. Those aren't applicable here. And it's one of the few interfaces that we have with our watches. Also, if the watch is mechanical, it's an interface that we're required to use often. Of course, I'm talking about the crown. And tonight I'll be taking a close look at 7 crowns on 7 watches that I own. And I'll present to you what I find to be the 3 best and 3 worst crowns and or winding experiences, as well as a crown or winding experience that's so neutral it's almost invisible. Now I do own some quartz watches, but I didn't really consider these, mainly because I rarely ever have to use their crowns. Essentially just for daylight savings time. So let's flip the camera around and look at some crowns. We'll begin by looking at the best 3 crowns, and coming in at number 3 is the Smith's PRS 29A. This is a sterile crown, as you can see here. The grip on it is really nice. It's a good size in proportion to the rest of the watch. Alright, let's see what it's like to wind this. It is nice. It's nice and easy to turn. It's not buttery smooth like we'll see in the number 2 and number 1 slot. But when you're winding it, you can feel it kind of ticking. And you can feel it slowly filling up. So the tension is slowly building. So there's no surprises when the watch gets full. You can kind of start being careful as it gets closer. Yeah, very nice. It looks great, and it's a pleasure to use. That is number 3. Coming in at number 2 is the Stova Antia. And what's great about this crown is look at how thin it is, and yet it has a really decent diameter to it. So it's really nice to use. And winding this thing is just buttery smooth. You could still like hear the clicking in there, so you know it's going. You don't have to get your ear up close to it. It's not quite as buttery smooth as watch number 1 or crown number 1, but it's pretty close. And just like with the Smiths, there's a nice gradual building of tension there as the mainspring is getting powered up. It has a branded crown, and the logo is nicely etched on there. And setting the time on this watch is great. It feels like the hands move at a great speed. I mean, surely they all move kind of the same, but they feel like they're moving just so smoothly. And it feels like they move fairly quickly, but not so fast that you can't get an accurate setting on there. That crown there comes in at number 2. Coming in at number 1 is the Nomos. And this crown here is actually really small. However, as we'll see, that isn't a problem in this case. It is a signed crown. However, that is so subtle. I don't know if you can even see it there. I actually had to get out my loop and look at it because I couldn't tell if there was just a smudge on it or a scratch on it. And it turns out it does say Nomos on there, but it's pretty much a sterile crown because you can't even really see that. And winding this, winding this is so great. And I'm a person who's still a little bit terrified of inadvertently overwinding a watch, and yet this is a sheer joy to wind up. It is super smooth. You can hear it winding. Because what I usually do is I'll kind of have a loose grip on it so that when it does get full, it starts to slip. So I have to really listen to hear, make sure that it's still moving. And I don't have to get up close to this watch. I can totally hear it as I'm winding it. Setting this watch is also phenomenal. Those hands just glide. And like the Stova, it feels like they're moving quickly, but yet you can still get a nice accurate setting on there. You can feel the mainspring filling up gradually, just gradually becoming more tense there, more tension against it. So there's no surprise. It just slowly fills up, so you know when to start being more careful. That crown is number one, mainly because of the winding. I mean, it's so small, but it winds so well that it doesn't even matter. That is number one. Now for the crown that comes in at dead middle is the CW Malvern. This crown is small, but it's actually not too small. It's still pretty easy to use. It is smooth, but not quite as smooth as the other three, and it's not rough either. It's kind of right in the middle. The crown is branded, and it looks pretty good. I really like the circle on there. That's pretty cool. And you can gradually feel the power getting full. So like the top three, you can feel it getting closer to being full. So you can start being careful. You can hear it pretty well. Yeah, it's just kind of neutral. You don't really think about the crown at all. Nothing really stands out good or bad. It's just kind of there. All right, now for the fun ones. The 3 terrible crowns. Coming in at number 3 is the Timex Marlin. And as you can see, we're looking at the black dial one because the silver dial crown flew out when I pulled it out to set it. So far it hasn't done that again, but I don't trust that it's not going to do it while I'm sitting here recording. These crowns, they look great because they're so small and they're recessed into the case there. And that is why they're terrible. They're really tiny and they're recessed into the case. So when you're winding them, you can barely get a grip on them. They are nice and loud, but they're kind of rough. These are very affordable watches and they kind of feel like it. It feels like you're winding an inexpensive vintage watch, kind of like the Russian watches that I have. And that is not terribly fun. And At least with this black one. Let me pop the crown out, which is also fun. So if I set the time and I push the crown in, watch the minutes hand. It jumps. I found a workaround for that. So if I'm setting it, what I'll do is I will back it up just a bit. And then it doesn't do it. So the Timex Marlin is not a whole lot of fun to wind or set the time. You do feel it filling up though, so it's not a surprise when it gets full. But these are fun watches. Their crowns are not. Coming in at number 2, worst crown, is a watch that I'm actually still honeymooning with. The Maxbill. This watch is brilliant, but that crown is tiny. It's completely sterile, which is fine, but it's so small. So you can barely get a grip on it. It's just tiny. And it's not super loud. If there's any kind of background noise, I really have to get in close to hear that I'm actually winding it. And being so small, when I have my loose grip on here as a safety measure, it's difficult to tell sometimes if it's actually moving. So I have to get in there close. Yeah. And setting it. It's kind of difficult to get that crown out even. There we go. And it's kind of stiff. There's resistance as you're setting it. It's not smooth and enjoyable like the Nomos or the Stova. There's like 2 clicks in there. I wonder if there's a ghost date in this. I'll have to look up that movement. And another thing is, this watch doesn't wind nearly as many turns as my other watches, which is probably fine, but it's kind of weird to get used to. And when you're winding it, it does kind of snap back, like I mentioned in the review of this. It's just not a terribly fun watch to wind, which is unfortunate because this is a hand winder. It's kind of sad that it feels an awful lot like winding up the vintage Vostok or Palliot. It is not fun at all. Number 2. And coming in at number 1 is the Longines Dolce Vita. And this crown looks great. It looks absolutely phenomenal on this watch. But this is a ridge right here. Fortunately, this is an automatic watch. So really the only time you have to wind it is to wake it up a bit when you're first getting it going. But when you wind this thing with that ridge in the middle there, it's like trying to turn a circle-shaped steak knife. It is absolutely terrible. Not comfortable. Really difficult to grip. You really have to squeeze that thing because there's no knurling or anything. It's a smooth single ridge there, right in the middle of the crown. This is the worst crown of all the watches that I own. And in the category of worst crowns, we have an honorable mention. The Khaki Field. And I'm not sure if it's just my particular piece, but for someone who's paranoid about inadvertently damaging crown stems by overwinding or whatever, this is a nightmare. So it has amazing grip. It's actually difficult to turn, so you have to grip it tightly. And there's no gradual filling here. It goes from you can wind it to boom, it stops. So it's really difficult to be cautious about that. I don't really feel it getting more tense. It's just always kind of an even amount of tension. And then all of a sudden you hit a brick wall. If this watch, if you could feel it filling up, so you knew when you were getting close, that would be much more enjoyable. And again, maybe it's just the particular movement in this particular specific piece. But yeah, there have been a few times where I've hit full without even seeing it coming. I think I'm there now. Yeah. Terrifying for a paranoid person like me. Other than that, it's a great crown. So there you have it, 3 crowns that are a pleasure to use, and 1 crown that's totally neutral, and 3 crowns that are an absolute nightmare. Thanks for watching.